Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. I would like to welcome everybody and a great good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on what part of the world you are in. So, as you know, that today's webinar is going to be focused all on the exploiting of the vulnerability on Total.Js platform, and we're also going to be conducting a live demonstration of the same. And just a few quick things before I hand over to our today's presenter, Mr. Ashwin. Our session will run for approximately 40 to 45 minutes. And after that, in the end, 15 minutes, we will have a Q&A session. And also simultaneously, we'll be running our polls. If you can see on your screen, there's a Q&A box. So if you have any question pertaining to today's webinar, you can post it in the Q&A box. And please simultaneously also participate in our polls. And that's it from my side. Now I'll hand over to Mr. Ashwin.
Thank you, Eva, and good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking your time to join this session. In the month of November, we did a live demonstration on exploiting the log4j vulnerability. And today we are taking this opportunity to exploit the code component of the Total.Js framework. And we will first run through the presentation, and then we will go through the actual live demonstration and explain to you how this code can be exploited, how this vulnerability can be exploited. Sorry. So quickly introducing ourselves, we are Asidia. We are based out of two locations. One is Denver, Colorado, where we are a licensed CPA firm, and Mumbai, India. And we are a CPA firm. We have an ISO IC certification body. We are one of the 15-20 odd companies empaneled by Cloud Security Alliance for cloud audits. We also listed with PCAOB, and we are accredited under IS and IF of the for the ISO certification. So some of the services that we provide is SOC test reports, ISO IC certifications, US federal assessments, India certain assessments, cloud security assessments, VAPTs, privacy assessments, and some other security services. In India, we are empaneled by the Government of India and in the Indian entity, and we do conduct VAPTs for the networks, cloud, and the web applications. Many of you may already know me. I have been in this industry for almost 20 years, and with 40 years of industry experience and 20 years of cybersecurity experience. I'm a CPA and MBA, and I have global security certifications such as CITP, CSSP, CISA, CISM, and so on. I did my CEH in the year 2007, and since then I'm practicing more on the compliance side, but also on the technical audit side now. And we have a team of OSCP professionals, CH professionals, who deliver the projects for us. And even in today's session, one of my team members will be helping me in conducting the live sessions. Of course, I will be giving the live commentary on that, but the coordination and the delivery, entire thing is done by the entire team, right? In terms of compliance audits and technical audits, I have run through VAPTs, SOC 1, SOC 2, GDPR, privacy, and NIST frameworks, and most of the compliance frameworks we do audit, and we do help companies stay compliant. You can find me on LinkedIn, and in case you need to reach out to us, you have our email ID, which will be at the end of the session. Always reach out to us. Some of the media presentations and media articles are provided to this LinkedIn. You can find me on ISACA, on the journal. I was a reviewer for 7 years, but I've also written some articles which you can find me and search for me on that. Coming to our core subject, right? Total.Js platform and the code component of the platform. Just a quick update on, or quick review of what Total.Js platform is. So it is a collection of server-side, client-side JavaScript, Node.js libraries, web components, icons, practices, and complete apps when written in pure JavaScript, mostly without dependencies. And it is a free open source platform. The basis of the platform is a server-side framework called Total.Js framework, and a client-side library called a Total.Js UI library, right? So it's a cloud development platform. JavaScript is one of the most popular languages, right, to use in today's websites and cloud environment. And Node.js and all other frameworks is very popular, and many organizations are using this framework to do their development activities. It's an open source and it's highly in performance. And what is the code editor? Total.js code editor. So Total.js code editor is a web-based IDE, integrated development environment, for building and managing web applications using the Total.js framework. It provides visual interface for writing, testing, and debugging code, as well as tools for managing dependencies and project files. The code editor is designed to make it easier for developers to build and deploy Total.js applications by providing an intuitive, user-friendly interface for working within the framework. Now, what are the features? Total.js code editor provides a web-based integrated development environment with the code editor, debugger, package manager, project management, testing framework, deployment tool, code snippets, and an intuitive user interface for building and managing Total.js applications. By offering these tools in an integrated web-based interface, the editor makes it easier for developers to build, test, and deploy Total.js applications. So we all know we use some kind of IDE, right? And this is an IDE wherein you create your application. So what is this vulnerability about, right? On 22nd September 2022, a security researcher reported this issue on the Total.js official GitHub page. Using the API common ping, it is possible to achieve remote command execution on the host machine via the shell meta characters in the host parameter. Now, initially it may sound confusing to you, but we will explain to this in detail, and we'll also give you a live demonstration. And we're going to repeat this aspect 2-3 times so that it is clear to all of us, right? Despite that, at the end of the session, if you have any questions, I'm happy to repeat any of those slides, any of the sections during the part of this webinar. Now, based on this vulnerability, which was discovered in 22nd September, right? The NIST published this CVE number 2022444019 in their database with a severity score of 8.8, which means high. It is a high vulnerability, right? It's not medium low, it's the high. Why it is high? Because it leads to the operating system's command injection, and which leads to the complete control over the machine hosting the server. That is the reason it is high, because one can have a remote execution done with this vulnerability, and the attacker can gain complete access over the server. That is the reason why this is important. And another reason why this is important is it's an open source framework. Many entities just download the Total.js framework and work on it without looking at the vulnerabilities. And if those components are still into your live production environment, it can cause havoc, and the attacker can gain full access onto your server, and then do a ransomware attack or create a database or encrypt the database or whatever, right? Make the application unavailable, whatever possible. So what is this code editor vulnerability? It's an API common ping is an API endpoint in the Total.js code editor. It is usually used to check if the API server is up and running. It's a health check kind of you're going to give a ping command to do a health check. That is the endpoint, API endpoint in the Total.js framework. Now the endpoint returns a simple string or a JSON response indicating that the server is alive and functioning correctly, right? So just to reiterate, the API common ping is an API endpoint. Endpoint means you ping to that endpoint to just check whether the server is correctly functioning or not as a health check, right? And in response, it gives us string or the JSON indicating that server is functioning live. So that's what we are going to use and test the API endpoint in our today's live demonstration. So with this vulnerability, an attacker could potentially exploit this vulnerability in the API common ping endpoint in the Total.Js code editor via shell meta characters in the host parameter. So what we are going to do today in our live session, we are going to send some meta characters, right, to the API endpoint, right, and exploit this vulnerability. That's what we are going to do today. So this type of vulnerability occurs when the endpoint does not properly validate user input, specifically the host parameters. Exactly. So when we send those meta characters, ideally the API endpoint should validate, right, what is coming in, right, or not. So it does not validate, right, and that is the reason of this exploit, and that is the reason of this vulnerability. So if the endpoint does not properly validate the host parameter, an attacker could send a request to the endpoint with the host parameter that contains shell meta characters. The shell meta characters could allow the attacker to execute arbitrary code on the server or access sensitive information. So once we have arbitrary code, we have a server access, we can do whatever we need to do, right? We can take we can do a privilege escalation. We are having the root access. We can down the application, whatever we need to do, right? So that's the whole vulnerability, and the vulnerability lies in the code editor at the API endpoint. We are going to inject a meta characters in the shell meta characters, and it would not validate. And because it's not validating, we are going to exploit that vulnerability and gain access as an administrator. That's what we are going to demonstrate today. So what is the impact of this vulnerability? If the devices running before the OE5ACE7 versions of the Total.Js 4 code editor, the attackers can take advantage of this vulnerability using the OS command injection to gain full control of a computer remotely. Once the attacker performs the OS command injection, it allows them to take reverse shell of the server, become root user by privilege escalation techniques, create backdoors for further use, access the entire network through the affected device, create a new user or delete existing users, access all data on the affected device or application, delete or encrypt files. That's what people do, right? They encrypt files, right? And then blackmail companies, okay, give us so much money in Bitcoins and so on. So, and then only we'll release all the data to you. This is one of the ways to do that. So, how this vulnerability works. So let's assume a scenario where an attacker gains user credit. So before I come to this, let me tell you that this vulnerability is based on a gray box approach. It is assumed that a user has valid credentials as a normal user to work on this platform, Total.Js platform. Okay, so this is the premise of this entire exploit and the test lab. So we have a normal user who is going to log in as a normal username and password, and using this vulnerability and exploiting this vulnerability, he will try and gain an admin access. Now, let us assume a scenario where attacker gains user credentials and gains successfully logged in as a normal user on Total.Js code editor server. From an attacker's perspective, he would like to escalate, right, privileges to become an administrator or gain remote code execution for the server. If the attacker finds the server running with vulnerable versions of the Total.Js code editor, the attacker will try and exploit this vulnerability as given in the next slides. Right? So again, the server does not properly validate user inputs and executes commands via shell meta character. That is the exploit we are going to test now. Now, just as a disclaimer, this test is created only for knowledge purposes, and we as SCDR, we want to promote this knowledge only for ethical purposes and not for attackers to use this to attack and bring down machines. We would like to promote this because entities should patch these vulnerabilities and have this knowledge that this is exploitable, and they should take care of this vulnerability into their environments. That is the whole objective of this session today and nothing else. Okay, so how are we going to exploit this? So what we are going to do, we are going to intercept traffic using Burp Suite and send it to the repeater. We are going to change the request method from get to post and put it in the API location as API common ping, which goes to the API endpoint. And we'll add the host header for ping and put shell meta characters such as a semicolon and the OS commands to execute on the server. Right? So once we execute this, what you will see is this post message going, right, with the host ID 1111 and semicolon and the ID. And the response, what we get from the server is 200 OK, success.true, value equals to UID into root. That means we have gained the root access on the server. Right? So this is how it is planned to show you in the live session now. So what we have done, we created a lab. We created a vulnerable system in our machine. We used ngrok to host it on a public IP for that, so that we can show it to you in a live webinar like this. Right. Second is the user who has a valid credentials on the server will log in with his username and password on this Total.Js server. He will gain access. The third, we will intercept the traffic using Burp Suite, like we just discussed in this slide above. Right? We will show you how the method is changed from get to post, and how this meta shell meta characters are sent right to the server, and the result is what we are getting. If you see, we created a listener, and the listener is connected on our local machine, and we get the response from the remote server, which is a root ID, which you got a root access to the server with the reverse shell. Right? So this is what we are going to demonstrate live now, and I'll ask my colleague to share his screen, and of course I will still give you the commentary on what is happening. So I'm going to unshare my screen, and my colleague is going to share the screen to get you to the live demonstration. So while he's sharing his screen, I will just reiterate what we have done. Right? We set up our own lab to demonstrate this attack. It is a sample. The name is just for namesake here. It is not our website. So please do not try and get to our website to hack like this. So our goal is to demonstrate only for knowledge and educational purposes, not anybody to misuse this knowledge, right? And in this session, we're taking the vulnerable Total.Js code editor server, hosting it through ngrok on the internet to be accessed from anywhere, right? And also, I already explained to you, this is a gray box testing. This is a gray box testing. My colleague is going to log in now, and he's going to log in as a normal user. Usually what happens is, if you're a normal user, you try and see, oh, why wouldn't I try to gain access as an admin, right? You try various methods, this blah blah, and you try on the internet how to escalate privileges to see how you can become an administrator, right? So once a person logs in, right, he has two options. Logs in as a normal user, he has two options. One, to take a remote code execution from the server, or escalate his privileges to the administrator level. Right? That's how normal an attacker would do. So what an attacker does, he does some Google search. He tries to see what are the exploits available on the particular server on the machines, and then he finds something, and then he tries to understand how to exploit the vulnerability from publicly exposed resources, and tries this to attack in the system. So now what we are going to do, right? We are going to start the Burp Suite, and Burp Suite is a tool, as you all may know. It's an open source tool. What we are using here is the community edition. You can download it free from the Burp Suite official website, and you can also check out this tool. It's freely available, and based on the research that we did on the internet, we found that this server is vulnerable. And now with this Burp Suite, what we are going to do is we are going to create a proxy server and intercept the traffic between the client and server as a first step. Okay, so we're going to capture the packet by clicking on this tab. Okay, so the packet is sent to the server. In the burp soup, there's a burp repeater that enables us to manually manipulate individual HTTP requests and response in order to test the behavior of the web application. So we are sending this packet to the burp repeater. As we know, API common ping enables us to test the API server running or not, and we know this is vulnerable as the vulnerable API endpoint in the code editor. So we will modify this packet, and we will change the request from get to post and insert insert the vulnerable endpoints. Insert to the vulnerable endpoints. Now, as a next step, we are going to uh, insert the host editor and specify the API endpoint address and send this packet to the server and test whether it's working or not. So that's the host IP, right? And this is successfully done, right? So we already know that this endpoint does not, right? We see this API server is working fine, and we know that endpoint is not properly removing all the shell meta characters. So what we are going to do is inject a semicolon meta character and that OS command to execute on this server. So here we can see that the command is successfully executed now. Right? So at this point, we know that we can execute any OS command. So it is time to take the remote code execution from the server. We can see this is a Linux-based server. In a Linux system, there is an inbuilt tool called netcat. And so we are going to confirm whether netcat is installed or not by typing this command here. We can see that netcat is already installed, right? And even if it's not there, there are other methods, other approaches, but for this demonstration, netcat is there, and we will continue with the netcat here. So now we are going to start, right, a listener on our machine, which will catch the reverse connection from the server. Right. Now next, what we are going to do in the burp repeater, we are going to run netcat. Right. So we simply provide our own local IP address and the listener port number and the bin hash, sending it to the server. So we saw this vulnerable uh, server validates, yeah, the shell meta character, and we got the reverse connection from the server. Right? We got the root shell in the server, which is highly privileged in the Linux system, and now we can do anything on the server. Basically, this is not a proper TTY shell, right? But we can make it correct by executing some of the Python and Bash codes. But due to time limitations, we will not be doing that. But if you see that we have gained access as a root on this server. So what did we do? What did we do? Why was the code vulnerable? The core of this vulnerability is that the API endpoint does not remove all shell meta characters. Right? Here is the vulnerable code. As we see, it is removing only single quotes, double quotes, and new line characters /n from the host property before using it as an argument in the ping command. So that was the live demonstration and of this vulnerability, exploiting this, and I'm sure you would have enjoyed this live demonstration, and I hope you will take advantage of this live session and try and not to exploit, but try and save your environments from hackers who go to use this explore, who can use rather this vulnerability to exploit your systems, right? So how do we prevent, right, hackers from exploiting this vulnerability? Now, as a basis of best practices in the cyberspace, in the SDLC space, in the cloud supply chain management space, right? We need to first have proper SDLC processes. To have SDLC processes means to do a source code validation, proper input validation, to do a VAPT prior to hosting your application on the public internet, right? So, as a QA process, it is good practice to do in the test or in the UAT, do all your tests. Make sure your test environment or the UAT environment is identical to production environment, wherein all the components that you're going to use, right, are properly tested, right? When you are doing a QA test as your source code test, right, make sure you test all your inputs correctly. Even at the OS level, even at the library levels, even at the API levels, make sure all the input validation is done correctly. Use secure coding practices. Best practices means put security in mind at the CI/CD pipeline itself. Right? Do a security testing, thorough security testing at least once a year with a good audit firm like ours who can do external VAPT for your organization. At not only at the application layer, but at the entire infrastructure layer below that, right? So security testing is important once a year or after every major release is the best practice. And even while you upload your minor functionality upgrades into your application, make sure that every functionality upgrade, even minor, goes through your QA QT processes, and do as part of the QA process, make sure VA scans and penetration testing is part of your internal QA aspect at all. So at SCDF, what we do cloud-based application testing. We follow the best practices into our methodology and use the NIST and all of those best practices or top 10 to make sure that we look at the application from a 360-degree angle and all the major flaws and aspects are covered. The benefits of periodic web testing is already known to all of you, but I'll just give a recap that it helps you identify loopholes right in your applications. It makes your application commitment to your customers, say 99%. Many customers love to give 99.99% availability, right? And to do that, this is one of the most important aspects. Just because your application is hosted on Amazon does not mean that it's available 99% time. Because if you do not secure your application, right, it does not guarantee 99%, 99% or whatever percent you commit to your customer. These are all of these best practices that you have to follow, right, in order to give that commitment. Just because AWS is available at the infrastructure level 99.99% does not mean your application is also available at a 99.99%, right? So it creates, it gives you, it identifies loopholes, gives you a clear picture about your status on the application perspective, right? To look at safety of your business information, to look at the availability aspects, and to provide the solution to the best practices that you may follow as a commitment to your clients. So when we do a VAPT, right, we use the best practices, which is a CVSS scoring system, right, which is an updated system level framework called version 3.1 to communicate the characteristics, severity of the vulnerabilities. As a best practice, we use the critical, high, medium, low, and info, and which is the classification based on this framework. And all our reports will have uh, this information for each of the vulnerability. And at least we assume that critical and high are going to have a highest priority, and those needs to be fixed at a immediate level by the organizations. What do we do in the space? In this space, we do VAPT services for application security, we do network and infrastructure security, and we do cloud security. And we, as told, we are one of the 15, 20 worldwide auditors empaneled by Cloud Security Alliance. And we also conduct training courses for OSCP. We have our own in-house cloud pen tester programs, which ranges for about 4 months, with the hands-on sessions on pen testing for specific uh, environments such as the Amazon AWS, Azure, and GCP. We also do red teaming services, and we also provide the architecture reviews and configuration reviews and all the technical assessments for the organizations. Again, the disclaimer that this demonstration, this video was only for knowledge purposes, and do not use this for non-ethical purposes. Do not use this for blackmailing anybody. Even from our side, we want organizations to be safe from this vulnerability. And that is the reason of providing this information. If you want to reach out to us for any specific issues with you, please email us at info@sed.io. And now we will take some questions if you have any. So, Ava, can you please run the polls and ask?
Yeah, so thank you. That was a great session. And now moving on, I have already started the polls. So I would urge everybody that if you can please participate in our polls. And also, if you have any questions, our Q&A box is open. So please, you can send in your questions, and Mr. Ashwin will be addressing those.
So we would love to have your feedback on the session. And if you can post it on the Q&A box, or you can send us an email or send us a response. Of course, this live session, what we had a webinar, will be posted on YouTube. You can share it with your friends. can share it with your colleagues later on. And I'm not sure whether whether how informative it was. If you have any suggestions to make it more informative in future, please let us know. And we do have such webinars in the future. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. And our LinkedIn also page provides all this webinar details, and I will give you most details. And there's a quick question here: in cloud security audits, what did you do? Okay, so it's a general question. It's a large question. I will try and answer you. So we do cloud security audits for PaaS, SaaS, and IaaS customers. Either it's the compliance audits or the technical audits. We do both. We do the application VAPTs. We do the cloud CSS star, CCM assessments. We do the compliance audits. Depends on what are you looking for, and I'm sure we should be able to help you in what exactly you're looking for. So the other question is, did you do PT for cloud infrastructure? Yes, we do definitely PTs for cloud infrastructure based on customer mandates, whether it's on the application side or whether it is on the cloud infrastructure side. We definitely do VAs and PTs on the cloud infrastructure. So, Alva, the polls are done.
Yeah, so I still see that some of you have not participated in the polls. So please participate in the polls. I would urge everybody. And also, if you have any more questions, please post them.
So I think Alva will wait for 2 minutes, and
Yeah,
if there are no more questions, we'll close the call, right?
yeah.
And if you want to say something which I forgot, please go on.
No, I think you've covered everything. Just one last thing which I would like to add is that, as you said, please be, stay tuned for upcoming webinars. You can sign up with us on our emails. We keep sending out emails when you have webinars. And if you're not signed up, then you can follow us on our LinkedIn page. We constantly post about our webinars on our LinkedIn page. So you can follow us and you can be updated, and you can also watch out our previous webinars which we have conducted. They're all there on YouTube, so you can watch them on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is there. And yeah, if you have any queries or you want to know more about audit or training services, you can always drop us an email and we'd love to discuss that further.
Right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Have a great evening. Have a great day ahead, depending on where you are. Thank you for this webinar, and thank you for coming with your precious time for this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.